Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. In this episode, we will be talking about transformation, about women, and how the two fit together. I'm delighted to welcome Kelley Steven-Waiss, an experienced intrapreneur and entrepreneur. Kelley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Susie. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. Um, Kelley, you're the head of transformation for ServiceNow, and you also help women achieve their entrepreneurial dreams. You've authored two books, so the Lessons from Female Founders, The Valley Girls, and you also co-authored The Inside Gig around unlocking hidden skills in organizations to maximize agility. Both brilliant books. Thank you for writing them. And I know that as Chief Transformation Officer at ServiceNow, you help ServiceNow's customers drive workforce transformation, and you're constantly at this intersection of technology and work, the future of work. So can you tell us a little bit about intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship, about your story, and for you, what's the biggest difference between those two, and what's the biggest area of common ground?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, I hadn't really planned to be either an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur. However, one thing is clear is that I amassed a ton of experiences and skills along the way. And one of my gifts was really to connect the dots. It's sort of what we call a visionary today. I think I sort of fit into that category. My journey started really when I got frustrated from the position I was in, seeing that software was not solving the problem I envisioned, right? There was no software to go buy that could solve for, people being visible in the organization across the company for their skills and experiences. So I believed, to put myself in a situation where there are no constraints, and I found a way to build it myself. And voila, my intrapreneurship journey began when I tied that solution to the biggest problem my CEO had, which was the need to transform the workforce and motivate those who were captive to learn new skills, to really execute that strategy. And so the core differences between being an entrepreneur and being an intrapreneur really down to the pros and the cons, right? Intrapreneurs, so those people that are developing and innovating from the inside, some of the pros are you have an immediate lab, right? You have a captive customer to work with, which is your own company. You may have funding and resources readily available, and what we call the speed of trust, because people know each other, you get to pick your own team. Some of the cons is that you likely have a day job too. No one appointed you to just go do this. So you don't get to do this full time. This is a side gig. And you may be driving a change internally that comes against a lot of resistance from peers. That happened to me because it was seen as a pet project and non-core, and how dare you get to go do a pet project. And you only have the team you have today. So you may not get additional funding, et cetera. So those are some of the, unique pros and cons. And, I think being an entrepreneur is really scary. You're out there on your own. And in my own journey, I had to go to the outside essentially when COVID hit. So I took 25 people out into the great unknown at a time when we were all in lockdown, and we were all learning how to sell online and not travel. So it was a very, very challenging period of time.
And it is very scary, isn't it? I think the safety of entrepreneurship is, as you said, you have the structure, you have some type of semblance of support, you have maybe funding, maybe a team, and you can actually sit there and feel a little bit safer. I do ask myself if that makes me lazy or not, in terms of innovating and pushing outside boundaries and things like that. But I think entrepreneurship is really scary. How did you manage that, Kelley? Because it's so impressive, and I loved reading about it. But what are the key skills for you as a leader that you needed to do that, to take that bold
Well,
step?
again, those skills were amassed just in the course of my personal life and my professional life. But I think it can be very lonely. So some of the key skills that really got me through that period of time was being resilient, So being able to come back from setbacks, being incredibly resourceful. You do not have a wallet that's open with an endless amount of cash. You have to constantly watch that. Being a great listener. Often you're in a situation where you may have to pivot. So if you're
Mm,
not listening to what the customer is saying, while not being influenced by everything a customer is saying either. So you have to have vision. You have to be aggressive. In the
mm,
situation that I had, people were in lockdown, we were selling online. So follow-up looked very different.
mm,
That,
mm,
how did you follow up with people? You've got to be a creative problem solver. You have to be incredibly humble because if you think you know it all, that's a sure way to fail. You have to be constantly learning the art of influencing and persuasion. You are selling your investors, your customers, and your employees every day. So
mm,
it is a game of whack-a-mole every single day. You need to be charismatic and excited because that inspiration needs to be infectious to your customers, to your investors, and your employees. And you have to be well networked
mm,
because you are going to be the chief salesperson. So
mm,
I think what you said too in the beginning about how did you get through it? You get rejected a lot. You will be rejected multiple times from investors, from candidates, from customers, and you will have these setbacks. And you have to believe in yourself and what you're building so you can dig into that when
mm,
things get, when you're in your lowest moments. And it can be
mm.
very lonely with the weight of the world on your shoulders. And you just have to have some mantra that picks you back up and says, this is why I'm doing it.
It's a lonely journey, isn't it? Particularly for females. And, there's lots of anecdotes in your book around how you've built your grit, but also your perseverance and your resilience. What's your biggest learning from the research and the experience you had as a senior female leader in a large organization, but also as a female tech founder? Because there you got two very energy-eating situations where you still want to have impact. So how do you do that?
So I learned very early that you are never going to get permission, validation, or recognition when you may need or you may want it. So you will have to get that from yourself. You don't wait for the okays or the green lights. In fact, everyone thought I was absolutely crazy when I said that we would enter a time when jobs would be broken into projects and roles would be defined, and resources would be allocated based on skills. And
Mm,
that progression would replace this notion of promotion, and sideways would be the new up when talking about
yes.
careers. So I knew this because I lived it and I thrived myself in this jungle gym career or portfolio career. So
Mm,
the software that the team and I ended up bringing to market was to help facilitate that for a mutual benefit to individuals and to companies. And make the work more productive and innovative for organizations and to find that natural win-win for the people and the company. So the headline here is you've got to really have some motivating factor that keeps you going because as a female founder or leader, you're never going to get the amount of validation that you want. It's just,
yeah.
it has, you have to be very self-driven.
Self-driven, but also validating yourself all the time, even when you're tired, even when you're getting rejected, even when it's not working as you like. How
That's
do you
right.
resource yourself, Kelley? Because it's the biggest question I get, particularly from female senior leaders, is how to resource themselves so that they don't lose, not hope, so they don't lose energy, because they never lose hope, because that's why they're doing it. They're passionate about this product that they're bringing to the world.
So I think for me, and I mentioned this in the book, is
Yeah.
that you have to have a personal board of directors.
Mm,
So what do I mean by that? I mean, not your actual board,
mm,
but a group of people around you with a set of skills, the people you trust, people you can be vulnerable with, people you can get advice and counsel from on very specific things. But it becomes your support network
mm,
and often a mirror of why you went and did this. And as I'm answering you, I'm thinking about all the moments, all the conversations, and sometimes, breaking down in tears, like, I don't know if I can do this,
Mm.
And, what's funny is just because, speaking about being a woman, when I was pregnant, I have 4 children, but when I was pregnant with the first child, I was so sick. I had
Oh
hypermesis. I
no.
was super sick, and I was in the hospital and the nurse is giving me an IV. And I said, I can't do this. I cannot go through with this. And I took a year to get pregnant. So of course, having this baby was important. But at my crazy period of time, I said, I just can't do this. I got to walk away and, please take this baby from me. I can't do it.
Oh.
Um,
Mm.
and these moments that obviously I had the baby and I got through that period of time, and I was going to get through 3 more very difficult pregnancies,
Mm.
but it's you got to dig within yourself and have a mantra that keeps you going. And so you have to find a way to resource yourself and have that network around you
Mm.
that keeps you moving forward.
And what is your mantra, Kelley?
So my mantra was number one, I can do this and I believe and number two, I believe in myself. So even when other people let you down, um, I knew that at the end of the day, I could count and bet on myself. And, I would talk myself through that. And I also had an incredible spouse who was
Mm.
very, very supportive. And we talk about that a lot when we talk about my book in different forums with women. Your partner in life is a huge part of this equation.
Massive.
And
Mm.
for some people, you're not married, they don't have a significant other, it's their dog or right, it's their best friend, but you have to walk this life with somebody that helps pick you up when you're down.
Mm. And in terms of mentoring and opening doors, how did you build those networks? I mean, there's some great anecdotes in the book.
Yeah, I was a natural networker my whole
Mm.
career. I was always keeping those relationships from the past. So when I'd leave a company, I didn't leave those relationships behind. I would
Mm.
meet them for coffee and lunches. And what happens is that people go on in their careers to change roles, be
Mm.
successful, be a decision maker. And guess what? Later on, I would go on to be a CEO and have to sell into that company.
Mm.
And those relationships either made introductions or were the decision makers that signed a commercial contract. And so I genuinely enjoy people. So this was not effort in terms of I didn't really enjoy people and I just had to make this an obligatory thing.
Mm.
It does take effort to
Mm.
leave time in your week to say, who can I have a coffee with? Who can I have a lunch with? I need to touch base with this person or that person. And I think that genuine interest in people made me a very well networked individual. And that served me very well when, remember, as an entrepreneur out there, you're the chief sales officer for your
Yeah.
company. So those relationships matter.
You've got to do everything at the beginning, haven't you? Your chief sales officer, your chief executive officer, your chief transformation officer as you grow, etc. But I think it's a really interesting thought to be intentionally putting aside energy and time to do
Mhm.
that because particularly with women, the first thing to go is what we need or what we don't have time for. So,
Like
so I'm just,
working out, like
yes,
working out. But
yes.
but but to that point, I think, what do women have in common?
Mm.
I think that separate us, because I think a huge part of the book, I really tried, that was part of the thesis I was trying to get to, is like, what is it about us that is
Mm.
so different?
Mm.
And I think women have one thing generally in common, and we are socialized to find the win-win.
Yeah.
We bring this level of empathy and sensitivity to the needs of everyone at the table, and we feel better when everyone walks away feeling like a winner.
Yeah.
It defines how we negotiate terms, how we problem solve conflicts, and maybe how we sell a solution versus a product.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I found in my own research, interviewing 30 plus female founders for my book, that we were building solutions to major problems in society that we cared about, whether they were medical problems or they were, could be solved through software, or they were social or economic issues. Making money for our shareholders was important, but not above the higher calling, which was that many of us, that had successful exits or IPOs, the satisfaction came from, what impact am I having? And in the case of my own story, I was thrilled to be acquired by a platform company like ServiceNow that truly brought my skills AI to the masses, more than 8,000 companies and some of the largest, most powerful employers in the world. And that was what I was after, meaningful impact for people in how they work. So I think that higher calling really, really matters for women.
And I think we're more equipped to do that, but also we've been on a growth journey or a growth curve that's maybe steeper to get there. But it's not always the case, is it? It's not always the case that women are helping each other rise, and particularly in the corporate environment, I see quite a lot of women who don't help each other rise.
That's right.
What would be your advice there? If you are needing to be supported?
Another mantra that I have, is that, you need to help one woman every single day. And if you help one woman every single day, and it could be making an introduction, it could be helping them negotiate a contract, whatever that one thing is, being a good listener, that adds up to 365 times that, or 365 different women that you helped. And I think if, what that has done for me is that I end up helping 4 women a day, and it'll be 4 women on one day and 2 on another, but it becomes kind of a muscle you develop around helping people, right? Versus, and it's really very, very fulfilling for me now. And every week I must hear 3 or 4 pitches from female founders, or helping them, adjust the pitch or make introductions for them or knock down a barrier in some way. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And it's not, you're always going to be busy, but these are the things that really matter. And so one woman every single day, that's if you get nothing else, that is a really important message.
I love that idea, which of course is what you're doing with your book, although it's not just one woman a day with your book, in terms of, the insights that are in there, the research that's in there, and what we can be inspired from and also learn from your book. So, there are other ways of having impact when you don't have extensible time, of course. If I come back to AI and the skills AI, can you tell me if that was your vision? Did you ever believe that it would get that big?
In terms of how AI would develop over time and
Yes.
become, yeah. I think none of us really knew. Here's what was my objective with the AI and Hitch was to make people that I felt were invisible, or particularly in underrepresented categories, who didn't have the networks and were always being passed over. I wanted to make the invisible visible with AI, because if I set criteria that would level set who would land on a slate. So you take the work, you allow the AI to go out and search for that criteria. The slate would come up with anyone in the enterprise meeting that criteria. So it was not about who you knew, it was not about where you went to university.
Yeah.
It was, do you have the skills? And therefore, if as a project leader or a people leader, if all of a sudden people who you didn't know, who were in underrepresented categories, show up on your slate with the capability to execute on the project that you said you needed, why not pick them? So all that training that we do for diversity, equity, and
Yes.
inclusion, it was sort of where the rubber met the road. And we would suddenly get leaders picking those individuals that they didn't know,
Mm,
but said, well, looks like they have the skills.
mm,
So we were, essentially getting the most out of AI, getting these very positive outcomes. Now, I wouldn't know that AI would explode, right?
mm,
Over the next, what would be the next 5 to 10 years, but it's amazing. There's so much good that can be done with AI.
mm. And that's a great example of it transcending bias, and sort of
Absolutely.
creating a more level playing field in terms of skills, the skills people have, and not, as you say, their background, where they've been to school, where they come from, but actually what their value proposition is to the workplace. So if I take generative AI, how can we leverage, therefore, what you started? But how do you see the future of that subject? Because I see so much inequity in organizations on this subject around who gets promoted as a talent, who gets seen on a list, and I think we miss 80% of what I'm going to call hidden
Yeah,
potential because we don't unlock it. And, I loved your book, The Inside Gig, for that because it was so aligned to my thinking. So there's my bias, but also gave me new insight into how we could actually try and start countering this systemic bias that we have in society, but also in organizations.
that's right. We will never change. I mean, human beings default to bias because we're communal and we want people like us
Mm,
to invite to our cave,
mm,
right? But at the end of the day, organizations are very dynamic. They have to change rapidly. People have under an iceberg so many skills and
mm,
experiences that need to be counted. It's not just about the role you're doing today. And I think that we have a lot of bias around, I certainly was seen as just an HR person,
mm,
and that came with bias. And
of
yet I
course.
had all of these other skills and experiences, even professionally, that people did not count or couldn't remember,
Mm,
because no one memorizes your CV.
no.
So how do we allow generative AI to really unleash human potential and creativity, but
Mm,
rather than destroy it?
yes.
And to give us the rich diversity of experiences and skills that live in an organization. So I look at Gen AI as a game changer. AI has been around for a long time. It was diagnostic, then it moved to predictive. Now it's generating content, and
Mm,
actually the next step after that is what we call agentic AI, where there are bots actually completing tasks, which
mm,
gives us another opportunity to say what is uniquely human that we do, how do we add value as human beings in that loop,
mm,
and leverage Gen AI to make us more innovative, to give us a step up on creativity. So for me, I think we always have to be looking for an opportunity to unleash that human potential.
mm. And how much reticence do you see in people in organizations to do that?
I think that we we do not change organizations because we decide to. We change them because we understand how to an attack, what I call the operating model, business term, but it comes very clearly down to we have to understand human motivations. We have to clearly understand the strategy and core values of an organization, which
Mm,
are the leaders.
mm,
You have to be willing to address your structure, your governance, your leadership capabilities, and your people. And you have to make necessary changes to people, process, and the enabling technology to make that all come to life. And so the best way to make this change, and I've been in transformation for a long
mm.
time. I was always the turnaround gal, these companies to turn them around, is you have to create a guiding coalition of people inside the organization whose hearts and minds are dedicated to this change. And then you have to figure out how to operationalize that change.
Mm,
And it starts with this, right? It's
yeah.
almost like when you see a wave building towards the shore, you have to build that energy first, and that energy becomes infectious. And I guess that is how I really drove a lot of change, is I figured out who are the people that have, a lot of energy around this and
Mm,
can be influential and infectious to the rest. And
mm,
I think at the end of the day, you know, um, people come to work to do good work. Nobody
mm.
wakes up in the morning and says, I want to do a terrible job today.
No, clearly.
So, human beings are good, naturally good. And
Mm,
so how do we find a way to extract the good? So with all the technology we have today, that was my mission. Like, how can we bring it all together so that people are enjoying that work and we have a way to extract that productivity and innovation? And I think, we're well on our way with
mm,
what technology is coming to bear
mm.
today.
And just to pick up on that, because it's mirroring what our first discussion around entrepreneurship and how you surround yourself and what you need. Um, what's your vision, Kelley, for women in tech, the female tech founders? If I take us to 2030, what would you love to be seeing?
I would love to be seeing women being super brave and leaning in on, helping change the world, whether it's medical innovation, right, to solve disease, um, being funded at the rate that men are funded, and having very successful companies as a result that have an impact in the world. And I think it starts, honestly, I think we knock ourselves out of the game early. I think we
Mm,
say, well, we're not going to be able to raise money, or nobody's going to think this is a great idea. Let someone else do it. And I think you got to dig deep in yourself. You probably have the motivation for the mission,
mm,
and that will carry you well forward. So I think there's a lot of women sitting on the sidelines today with great ideas that will change the world, and they need to lean in. And yes, over time, we will change the amount of funding that goes to women. And people like me who've had success are
mm,
investing in small founders ourselves. And in many ways, not just with our money, but
mm.
also our networks and our advice and counsel and guidance. So this is totally possible. So I think I would like to see by 2030 the number of female innovators going up,
Mm.
whether the inside or on the outside as entrepreneurs.
Nice. That's a nice vision. What was I going to say? So time is running. I do have one last question, which is a big question. I don't know how long it's going to take you to choose. What's the most transformative thing, Kelley, you have ever done?
Well, I want to break it into personally, professionally, and then sort of in my primary role that I thought I would sort of die in, so to speak.
Mm,
But personally, becoming a mother of four was one of the hardest work, but incredibly rewarding. Professionally, I think becoming a startup founder at 50 as the
mm.
pandemic was in its, just taking off and we had no visibility. I felt like somebody took me up on a glider flight and just let me go. No engine. I gotta land this plane. But it was the greatest learning of my career and incredibly rewarding. I think as a CHRO, taking a commoditized business to where we were losing share and there was no rudder for that
Mm,
organization. One with an outstanding leadership team, culture, vision, and actively competing on that stage for the top quadrant as a
mm.
leader on the board was one of the most rewarding transformations. Again, I think human beings are multifaceted. I think female
Absolutely.
founders are multifaceted.
Mm.
I don't want to send a message that anyone out there can, to walk in the journey that I did. You can't be a mother as well.
Mm.
Um, you can, you really can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Yeah, I like that. And it's coming back to the operating system for me. So how have you built your operating system, your personal operating system, but also your professional operating system? And do
That's
you
right.
ever go back and do upgrades or versioning or yeah.
That's a really good way to say that. I think just like operating systems have to be brought to the new upgrade.
Mm,
I think that you learn a lot over the course of your lifetime, both professionally and personally. You get more wisdom.
mm,
If you can incorporate that wisdom and revitalize yourself, that is the most powerful thing you can do. And at the end of the day, the one thing that cannot change is that you have to believe in you.
mm.
That that is the most powerful mechanism in this fight, is that you got to believe in yourself.
And there's this myth, isn't there, that once you're successful, you always believe in yourself.
No, because
What can you tell
you're
us a bit?
operating that operating system. Because inevitably you will you will have setbacks in your
Mm,
life, whether
of course.
they're your own health, or family related or professional. It's the ability to come back from setbacks. It's the
Mm,
mantra, it's the believing you will. It's how you talk yourself back in. You know, the most successful people, when you study them, have built a muscle around resilience and how they come back from setbacks.
mm,
And I would tell anyone out there, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you must really develop the muscle for resilience because you will need it.
mm, mm. And you have to be comfortable with questioning yourself constantly, don't you?
Yeah, and just comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yes.
comfortable with the fact that the learning never ends. It just
Mm,
never ends. And I think even when we die, you know, yes, it's the end, but the wisdom that we were
mm,
gaining was to the very end, right? Every day you gain more wisdom. Now, if you only had that wisdom you have on your last day, on some of your first days, right, that would be great.
mm.
But I think while you're on this earth and you have a chance to make a difference, keep trying to find a way to incorporate those learnings every day.
I was going to ask you if you had a final call to action for our listeners, but that was so powerful what you just said. I don't know if we should leave that as the final call to action. If you had
Yes.
to give a final call to action, Kelley, what would you say?
Well, I feel like I would, there are really three. Never stop learning. Look for a way to help a woman every day and believe in yourself. Those are the three.
Super. Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners with that. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights, your stories, and your around your book and female founders. Where can people find out more about you and your book and what you do?
So I have my own website, which is just www.kelley, Kelley, Steven-Waiss.com. And of course, both of my books are on Amazon and can be, purchased in, audio book, ebook, or hardback. And please send me feedback. I'm out there on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you.
And I would definitely recommend to read both of them. They both bring very different things, but they're both about continual learning, resilience, and wisdom. So I'm going to leave our listeners with that. Thank you. Thank you, Kelley, for a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Susie.
Thanks.